Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. In the last video, I moved my hub from my starter location to my new factory in the Lake Forest biome. This factory is making my ammo, explosives, and fuel for my jetpack. Everything a growing pioneer needs on an alien planet to tame the flora and fauna. Now it's time to work towards getting this phase complete. There are a number of factories I need so that I can build a basic electronics factory. Today I'll be building a couple of those factories to automate copper sheets, quartz, silica, and quickwire. These won't be very big factories, but big enough to feed my dimensional depots and have plenty to send by train to another factory. Editor Moo here. Before we start the video, I just want to apologize. The video quality is not what it should be. In editing, the preview window for the video is much smaller than full screen, and I unfortunately didn't notice until I was about to upload it. I don't know how it happened, but to make a long story short, I would need to re-record everything and then re-edit it. I really considered it, but I'm afraid that would have delayed this a few more days, and if I'm being honest, I think it would hurt my drive and motivation. I know many of you watch on the second monitor while you play, and hopefully the lower picture quality doesn't take away from the video too much. Again, I'm very sorry about this. I will make sure the next video is much better. Please bear with me for this one. And now I've got a view of the red forest when I look out my window, or bamboo forest, or whatever this is right here. So we're in the new hub, and as you saw in some of the clips, but I forgot to show it, I added some alien augmenters. So thankfully I had just enough. I actually don't know if I have any. I have 2 summer sloops left. I'll definitely need to get some more, but these seem pretty worth it. Now with these here, I've got a good amount of power, so I could definitely cut down those coal power plants. And maybe I'll do that by the end of the video, but for now, we have factories to build. Man, these things do look cool. For these, I'm really happy that the power connection is pretty low on the machine, because it was really easy to just cut a hole real quick. Just clip it straight through the machine and just do the wiring underneath on the ceiling. All of the leaves and wood that I processed at the end of the last video was actually what I had left over at my old hub. This right here is from destroying the forest to make room for the turbo fuel power plant. So now I can turn this into, well, a little bit too much. We'll have to make 2 trips. But now I can turn all of this into more liquid biomass. And since I'm in no rush, just go ahead and load it all up here. And eventually get through there. If I wanted to process it faster, I could just fill up those containers and it wouldn't take as long to sort through. But this is already full and I'm not going to go through 300 anytime quick. There it goes. Alright. Now that all the DNA capsules are finally done sinking, let's see where we're at. Let's see what kind of dent we can make in the store now. Well, I think we can pretty much buy, well, just about everything except for all of the trophies, I think. Wait on those. Those are always last. But I should have enough to unlock just about everything else, I think. For some reason, I thought I had more to unlock. But, yeah, I'm pretty sure parts and equipment, we don't need any of that. Well, I mean, I should just get myself a coffee cup. Other than that, yeah, we're good. Okay, only 48.
For more information about this bonus package, please visit our information booth in Earth, open on the first Tuesdays and Wednesdays of the month, between 6:25 a.m. and 6:53 a.m.
I wish I had those working hours. 6:25 to 6:53, let's go. Oh good, it does show you holding the coffee mug. Oh, that's great. Well, we've made good progress so far. Pretty happy with the way this one turned out. And now we need to build some more. So thankfully, we've got plenty of power. And I'll be able to clean up the coal pretty soon. Out of the 3 factories, I'm going to be starting with Quickwire. And I think it'd be easiest if I just continue this train line. So we're going to figure out a way to drop that down And then right past it should be the Caterium. Let me head down there. Here is the end of the train line, and if we head just right on over here, there is the sulfur that I'm using, and then right up there is the Caterium node. So there's my basic starter setup. So here's what I'm thinking. The train line needs to go from here down there. I don't mind it being off the ground, but that seems a bit high, and I think a ramp would take a really long time to get low enough, so we're going to do another spiral. And then as far as the Caterium goes, I don't want to process it up there by the miner. If I could avoid pumping water up that high, I would much prefer it. Got plenty of water down here. Honestly, I think I only need one water extractor, so that should be pretty easy. But the trains can take up a decent amount of space, so I think I should probably figure out where the train is going to go, and then I can kind of figure out where I want to put the factory so that I have enough room to be able to merge on and off the train track. Alright, to start this off, we are just going to zoom straight out and make sure that this can plenty of space. And well, actually, why don't we try one thing first? My spiral uses a 2-meter ramp because that's the sharpest I like to use with trains. And so if I could just lead from the very last part of the spiral straight up to this platform, then I could cut down some of the length of how tall the spiral needs to be, as opposed to it just going straight out. But the question is, will the locomotive clip? And I think I know the answer. The answer is yes. Now, it's not a lot. It's only really the side thing. So if that doesn't bother you, I say just go for it. It's close, and the freight cars probably wouldn't even clip. So it's really only the locomotive, I bet. But, I'm just going to do it straight. I don't think any of my trains are going to be carrying so much that the little extra track length is going to make too big of a difference. At least that's what I'm going to tell myself. I extended it 16 foundations, and I think from here I should have just enough space. So I think this will bring it out just far enough that I have clearance all the way around, and I'm hoping the spiral ends on the ground and not in the water. Let me get my train spiral blueprint, page down, and then just make sure we line up the right foundation. I think this was, yeah, the outside track. Okay, so yeah, that would go there. Alright, so let's place this one. Good old radial menu makes this easy. Now I can switch this to blueprint mode, and I'm probably going to need to get on top of it. Probably easiest. And the tricky part is finding out which way I need to point this. Okay, go that way. There we go. Now, just nudge it down a whole bunch of times until it's in place. I think it's 2 more. There we go. Yeah, so 2 more once it's at the very edge. So that's where I want it. Alright, so let's go ahead and place this one and take a look. And this is why the camera mode is so great, even when you're just building. Now I can kind of take a look and make sure this is where I want it to go. I don't have to waste all my fuel. So yeah, this is going to end up just like right on the edge of the ground, I think. Maybe a little bit of it will go into the water. But I think this should work out. And now I just take this big spiral and I just go to each one of these. The arrow faces where it ramps up. Just going to go one by one and place all of these until we get to the bottom. Gotta love the liquid biofuel and it just lasting so long because it makes things like this just so much easier. Make sure that I have it placed the right way. The main pillar takes a lot of steel, and so I just have to switch back to the regular one, place a couple more of these, and then I'll have enough steel again to place the last part. Well, that's backwards, isn't it? And now I've got a spiral to get me up and down the waterfall. So it did turn out a little bit interesting. The distance and the amount that it drops for the inside track is really smooth. It's just the right amount. But when you extend it one foundation out farther, it gets a little bit different. As you'll see, the outside track kind of has to curve down and then curve back up. So it's a little bit different. I like the way the inside track is much smoother. The only thing I could think of is right now the distance is 2 foundations going from basically a 90-degree turn, right? So if like you look at the center here, you go up 2 foundations, it's the center of this one. So if I did 3 foundations, I'm afraid that it might be a little bit too sharp. Just because since I'm doing right-hand drive, It's the outside one that I need to make sure isn't too sharp. If the inside one is too sharp to climb, it doesn't matter because the train is only going to be going down on that direction. And so it'll be able to make it down just fine. But I also have a feeling that it would just trade the wavy part being on the outside to then the inside. I'm open to suggestions if any of you know how to kind of smooth this out, but for now, I think it'll be just fine. The important part is that it works. And because these are an extra foundation wide compared to the other spiral that I built, I felt that they just needed a little bit more support because it just looked a little bit funny having all of these things stick out. So I just ran some concrete pillars just right in between all of them. Now that I have that in place, it's time to build a factory. I'm thinking this area is a pretty good spot that I could probably do the factory where I won't need to pump up the water too far. I figure I'm going to need at least one pump. I'm not going to be able to build just right on the water, but I definitely don't want to pump it all the way up to where the miner is. So I think right here should give me enough space to be able to put a train station and a factory. And then the train line will just run down here. Probably do the same thing where I run it close to the water, or I might run this one a little bit more in the water just so I can avoid taking out a lot of these trees. I'm going to have to take out a couple of them, but I'm going to try to leave as many here as I can. I've got a foundation in place, so it's a good place to start. I actually don't need a lot of machines. If we take a look at the spreadsheet real quick, I'm going to take 300 Caterium ore. Using the pure Caterium ingot, I can overclock them all to 250% and take it from 12.5 machines down to 5. And the great thing with the pure Caterium and just the normal default Quickwire recipe, the recipes are 1-to-1, meaning I can do the same thing and overclock all my constructors and use only 5. And then I can just direct feed those refineries right into the constructors. I'll only need to load balance the 5-way split once. So there should be plenty of space. But I also needed to figure out where the train was going to go. And I realized the way I kind of had it ending there, I was going to need to turn. So this should just barely clear that tree. And then it's going to go along this way. And if you're curious, I'm using the Manta Raise mod, which basically changes its flight path so it doesn't just fly straight into here. Because without it, it absolutely would have nosedived and just flown straight through all of this. This spot and the grassy fields are probably the two locations where it's just kind of a pain to work around the Manta, and I didn't want to limit where I could build because of it. These are my stackable train track blueprints, and then I just made a pretty simple pillar. It's just a foundation, and then on top of it, I turned it 45 degrees, and then basically just clipped the two of them into each other, like that. And then just made it a blueprint. And then just added the concrete beam to the side of it. So each one is its own blueprint, but that way I don't waste a ton of materials by clipping so much of it into the ground because most of these shouldn't be too tall, so I shouldn't need too many of them. Now that I know where the train track is going to go, I can kind of plan out where the factory is going to be. So if the factory is going to be here, I think I might try to build around these trees, and then somewhere over here will be like my train station, and then I can have it link in somewhere over here on this like next section. I may have to kill a couple of these trees, but hopefully not too many. Let's go ahead and start with the machines. Right, that should be centered on the platform, and I think 2 foundations should be enough space to do all my load balancing here. So let's go ahead and place 1, 2, 3. Should have set the recipe first, except for I should unlock the recipe first. Have any of you noticed that when you search in the hard drive library, it doesn't always show up? Like, I am pretty positive that I have the pure Caterium. Isn't that what it's called? Pure Caterium. But when I search for pure or cat, it didn't show up. Oh well, I've got it. Fully overclocked. There we go. These will intake 60 ore and 60 water. Output 30 ingots. I'll need 300 Caterium and 300 water, which is 1 completely overclocked water extractor. All of these numbers work out so nicely. And since this is going to be a small factory, I'm going to go ahead and try to keep things nice and compact. So I'm going to set the constructor just right next to the refinery. And of course, if I hold control, it locks it to the middle of the machine, which is not where the output is. And fully overclocked, these will intake the 30 and output 150 Quickwire. In total, I'll be making 750 Quickwire out of here. And these just need Mark 1 belts all the way down. And for this, it's going to be pretty simple, but I am going to change it up just slightly from how I normally do it. Normally, I like the pipes on the bottom and then the solids on the top. I like to just keep the pipes flat where you can and not have to deal with any of the elevation change. But since I'm going to have to pump it up here to begin with, I figured let's switch it up. So we're just going to do a good old 5-way split. So on this side, I'm going to do the 3. This side is going to be the 2 and the part that gets looped back. So this one goes on the first half of the foundation. This one goes on the second. And then the third splitter is going to go right in the middle of everything. And it's going to go lined up with this one. And then the merger, as long as they don't fall off, the merger can just go right here. And I've still got plenty of space. Look at that. The refineries need 60 per minute. So connecting all of these, I just need Mark 1. But I do have to use all 3 of the outputs of this splitter. And that's the one that gets looped back to the merger. If each of these belts needs 60, that means this is 180 and 180. This belt needs to handle 360, but we're going to plug in 300. And that's going to come from all the way up there. Yep, right up there. So the bus has a little bit to go, but it's not too far. Now, as far as the water goes, the height of pipes is really interesting. So the difference between these two is 2 meters. But the thing with going up to this height right here that gets really tricky is now, if I place a 2 meter foundation just temporarily, I can place a pipeline. So if I want this pipe to plug in here at a right angle, this is the closest I'd be able to put it to the machine. However, going from here to here is going to give you that. And unfortunately, you would need to place it right here for it to get the same right angle. But now, this is just going to be too short to place a pipe. So unless you want to bring the pipes out farther, you usually have to go up one more. Because now at this distance, I can place a full foundation instead. And when I place this pipeline junction, straight mode and horizontal look the same. And then we got to go back to horizontal and vertical. And now at this height, you get your S-bend. And now I can delete my temporary foundation. And there we go. And I've got my nice right angles. For the water extractor, I'm just going to go right down here. I think that would be a pretty short trip to take the pipe and just make things easy. So I'll just have just a really tiny little housing for it probably. And then I'm just going to place it right in here. Oh, Caterium does the super glowy thing too. Oh, wow. Sorry. Holy cow. That is, oh, so bright. Why does it do that? Can't look at the hologram for too long. Do I need to just change the color? Is it the colors I'm using? Man, that's, oh, that's so bright. That's definitely going to get moved. And it's not going to be Caterium anyways. We'll make it blue. And then I just need to figure out how to get the pipe from here to right there. And not too far. The other thing is I'm going to need to extend this. And let's see. So let's just pave through this whole thing and then figure out which ones I have to get rid of. Okay, so if I want to keep all of these trees, it'd probably be all 4 of those. Alright, well hopefully I can make those gaps a little bit smaller. I wanted to keep the big trees if I could, so I might chop down this little one just to give me a little bit more space, but hopefully I can work around these ones. I think it'd be cool if the trains went right around the tree somehow, but I also don't know how I'm going to have quite enough space for a train station. The factory itself takes up so little space when you use power shards. I think the train station is going to be the biggest part. There is still quite a bit of decorating to do, but we've got the water extractor in place, got a pump. Since it was so short, got to keep the bus pretty simple. I keep going back and forth on how I'm going to do the water. I forgot that I had just so much space under here that I could pretty easily just feed it underneath. And so for right now, that's how it's working. But that's not going to last very long. Let's go through the rest of it. And then we've got the bus. So it just comes right over here. It ended up working out really nicely because the space in between these lifts was pretty much right at 7 foundations each time, so I only needed 1 belt to connect each lift. That was pretty nice. And after a couple of those lifts, we are right over here at the miner. The last bits of my temporary setup. I do still need this power tower for a little bit longer until I get trains to hook up power throughout the world. I've still got to rely on these. But I am going to just run power kind of the normal way all the way down to the factory so that eventually when I do delete this power tower, it won't turn off this miner and shut down this factory. The miner's completely overclocked to 300. Conveyor belts and the jetpack. So great. Alright, so after I got all of this done, I was trying to figure out where in the world these trains are going to go, because man, train stations just take up so much space. And I'm realizing that even if I avoid these trains, this train station is going to need to go all the way out to like here probably, at least. The train station and each freight platform are 2 foundations in length. So if you have a locomotive and 4 freight platforms, that's 10 foundations at a minimum, and then you still need it to be able to get in or out somehow, right? So they can start taking up quite a bit of space, and I just don't really like the way this is turning out. One of the main things I was trying to go for in this playthrough was more verticality, and so even though this factory doesn't have a lot going on, so I don't need the verticality for the actual factory, I don't like how spread out and how big of a footprint this is going to make for how little I'm actually going to be manufacturing. So thankfully, I really haven't done too much work here, and I think I could do better. And the factory has been replaced with the train station. I figure if I need 1 more pump, it's not really the end of the world, and I'm just going to build this factory on top of the train station. And I think that fits the theme of this playthrough a little bit more. I wanted to plan for the future, so I went ahead and added 2 train stations. Now each one only has room for 2 freight platforms. Like I said, this factory isn't going to be manufacturing a lot. In total, it's only 750 Quickwire. I want to go ahead and send 50 of it to my dimensional storage. I don't need that much, but it's a really easy number to deal with, and then it leaves me 700 to send anywhere else. 4 freight platforms is more than enough to transfer that much Quickwire anywhere on the map. Since Quickwire stacks to 500, it takes a pretty long time to fill up a freight car. But then there's going to be a factory that only needs, 100, and then there's going to be another one that needs, 230 or some random number. So chances are I'll have to do a little bit of load balancing, and they'll go to more places. So this just gives me some more options. Eventually, I'll definitely need more. But this will take care of my dimensional depot needs, and I'll be able to for sure send it over to my electronics factory. I'm only planning out factories for the current phase instead of trying to plan out the entire playthrough all at once. Trying to make it a little bit more bite-sized and manageable. And it keeps me on my toes. Who knows what mistakes I'll make that I'll have to correct later. Before I build the factory, which is still only going to be the 5 refineries and 5 constructors, I want to figure out how this train is going to work. Don't imagine I'm going to need the stackable track at this section right here, so I'm going to use my smaller one. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in default auto connect. I guess only one of them is going to auto connect. Kind of strange, but alright. Let's go ahead and see where we can put this. Alright, so we can make it all the way out to here, which is pretty good because I did want to give it a little bit more space. If I really wanted to, I could probably figure out how to get the intersection into here and get the trains to be able to go in here. But I feel like that might be just a little bit too cramped and just not quite enough space. When in doubt, just give your trains more space. So I am going to have the 3-way intersection in between these 2 sections here. And so I may try to move this one back a little bit. I'm going to have to delete that one tree. But I think this one doesn't need to be quite as close. And then that way I'll get a nice curve through here, hopefully. I'll probably have to move this, but for now, that looks like a good spot. Alright, and so I'm going to switch it to 1 meter just so I can delete these easier using the filter tool afterwards. But let's go ahead and just lay out some foundations. Right, so we're just going to redo this whole section right here. Normally I make these at an even foundation distance apart, so it makes everything like this so much easier. But I really wanted this one to end on the ground instead of in the water, so I scooted it back a couple meters, and of course now I'm regretting it. but we're just going to work with it. So the tricky part tends to be finding where exactly you can make the turn. And as long as you go the same distance, you can do a 90 degree. You can make a lot of other turns too. But for this, that's what I'm looking for, is just a nice even 90 degree. So if we go 1, 2, and then 1, 2, that should be the sharpest. And then this one can easily make that turn as well. But this one, it's 3 by 3. For whatever reason, it didn't automatically line up right there. So if you just scroll your mouse wheel, you can manually change the angle. And so I want to make sure that it's lined up right at the half mark of the foundation. Now the thing with this side is these angles are probably not going to work. From here to here is just not going to be the same. So for this, we just need to shorten it a bit. So 1, 2. Basically be the right spot. There we go. And then we just come to the same spot, and then it'll work on this side. All right. And now I can grab my other blueprint, nudge it into space, and then for this, I'm going to need this to come right to the edge. So that's why the angle was off. I didn't quite put it in the right spot because yeah, that's just my mistake. But this should all work. I just need to replace these anyways. These may or may not be connected, so I'm just going to reconnect them. Now that this is in place, we shouldn't have any issue. But on this side, they're ever so slightly different. So now we just got to redo it from here, which isn't too bad. I played around with it a bit, and I just didn't like how off-centered it was, how much closer it was to this side than it was this one. So I kind of found a more central point, but the very center was going to run into those trees, so just a little off-center. And then I just needed to extend the straight section a little bit on either side, and then it all worked out just fine. But thankfully, three-way intersections aren't too bad to make. Now, unfortunately, all of my signals are blinking, so I think something might be wrong here. Let's try replacing the signals. So let's go with, we'll just do the block signals first. So block on the out of the intersection, and then path signals in. Okay, well, we have some of them green, and then some of them not. Like this one I feel like should be working. So for this block, what if we have this one right here? Alright, so we fixed that one, and then that one, yeah, doesn't have anything. Okay, oh, well now this one is wrong. What's wrong with this one? Signal loops onto itself. So yeah, somewhere I think I'm missing one, or it's this one that's wrong. Oh, okay, so yeah, that fixed it. Does this need to be a path signal? An intersection, it should be able to be either one. Let's see. I have signals on the entrance and the exits of the train stations, and then one on this one, so that each one is its own, and then only one can exit a train station at a time, but once it passes here, then the other one could exit. And I don't see how this signal loops onto itself. So without that signal, it's fine, but that doesn't make any... I don't want it to work like that. If I make this a path signal? Nope, that doesn't like it. Signal loops onto itself. Well, I think it might have just been this intersection, because once I deleted it, it still has that thing, and that's not supposed to be the way it is. Okay, let's try this again. Victory! We solved the problem. I don't really know what the problem was, but sometimes you just have to rebuild things. And don't worry, I am going to patch that hole, even though no one is ever going to see it. But I know it was there. Alright, and there we go. So there's my little train station, and I went ahead and added the holes around the tree because, well, why not? And it adds a little bit more foundation under the tracks in these spots. And this is how the trains will get in and out. And then underneath, because I don't have very much room for the freight platforms, is where I'll do any of the load balancing, because I've still got plenty of space down here that I can do any of that load balancing and put the storage containers down here for the buffers. Alright, so now I'm just going to zoop up probably that high. think you need 6 as a clearance, so usually at the 7th one should be just enough, right? Ah, just enough space. Perfect. Okay, so up here is where I'm going to build the factory. But I've spent long enough on this. Let's do a little bit of fast forwarding. We'll take a tour and turn it on. And here's the new Quickwire Factory. I've just got some ugly sinks on the outside, but my plan is to eventually use all this Quickwire, so once I put these on trains and send them elsewhere, I can delete these. So hopefully sooner than later, I can get rid of them. I forgot to do the save times for the before and after on this one, but it actually took me just under 3 hours to build the whole factory, do the decorating and everything else. So really, not bad. Pretty good for me. Right down here, I've got my little housing for the water extractor, and it's already been turned on, so the pipe is already full. And I've got a little walkway to take me over here, just in case I need to get over into it. And we've just got the one water extractor completely overclocked. That looks really weird. Man, why didn't I do it like that? Oh, that pipe looked funny. Now it looks better. Alright, so from here, we can just go right on back into the factory, and this is the logistics area. I've already got my input belts ready for the freight platforms. I just need to plug them in and then tell the trains where to go. Unfortunately, I didn't leave myself quite enough space for the sinks down here, or else I would have preferred to put them down here, but I just always forget how tall that silly little satellite and antenna are on the side of it. But if we go through this door, we've got access to my elevator. I decided to add a couple different entrances just because, well, why not? So there's the outside one, and then this one is just a tiny bit higher up, but on this side, and it's on the inside for the train station, and you can still kind of get around at least a little bit. And then we can go up to the Quickwire floor. And here are the 5 refineries and the 5 constructors. So I didn't want this to be any taller than it had to be, since I was building the factory on top of the train station. So I try to keep the roofs fairly low. And then I just used the frame foundations to let it breathe. And there is one sink over here, but we'll get to that. We've got the load balancing on this side. And then, yeah, I decided to go back with this because we were bringing it in. Since I'm dealing with so much elevation, feeding them from down below didn't seem like a good idea. It's going to drive me nuts that they aren't the same. So it really depends on where you connect it. And I always forget because it literally tells you it is going to go horizontal and then vertical. So if I go from here to here, this horizontal part is going to be a meter longer. Whereas if I go from here to here, now this horizontal part is the one that's a meter longer. Ah, much better. Since I'm having to pump these up so far anyways, I decided I would much rather have them drop down into the machines instead of having to pump them all up directly into the machines. I'm pretty sure that this will just work better, especially since I'm relying on the full 300 out of this pipe. Each constructor is outputting 150, so I went ahead and grouped up 2 sets of 2s, so each one of these belts should have 300 on there, and then the very last machine is going to fill up my dimensional depots. For right now, I just have 1. Eventually, I'll build a bigger power plant, and I'll want some more dimensional depots because those fuel generators can eat through your Quickwire pretty quickly. I keep forgetting to use these, and I don't know why, so I'm going to try to get into the habit of putting the throughput monitors on the belt before I turn it on, and that way we just get a better picture instead of me either forgetting or adding it only at the very end. Right now, I'm going to fill up my dimensional depots with 150 because, well, why not? But eventually I'll use the other belt and I'll send some down to the train station and I can use that in other factories. Because I certainly don't need 150 per minute of Quickwire. And if you're wondering why the floor looks like this and I have it dented in, it's because I wanted to avoid the tree that was right there. And unfortunately, if I had this go straight across, those branches stuck through the wall and, well, we just can't have that. That looked really funny. I'm not the most imaginative when it comes to the architecture. And so working around the terrain has really helped just kind of force me to build just a little bit different and give me something to work around. And I've been really enjoying it. And now the bus goes down, over, and then back up. For one, I already had it placed that way. And 2, if I were to bring it in just straight from this height all the way over from there, I don't know. It would not have been a big deal. It's not really that far, and especially if you frame it with the big frame pillars, I could have put 1 or 2 supports, and it would have looked just fine. But I also don't mind that I kept it a little bit closer to the ground too. And now it's the best part of the factory, watching it come to life. And just like that, they're up to 300 each. And if we go over here, we've got the 150. The Quickwire Factory is up and running. So the one thing I should show you is I am actually only using 1 pump for this entire thing, and it's down here. Now I completely understand if you try to avoid this completely, because normally I do too. But I was really curious if I could rely on this. And I've let this run for a bit, and I haven't had any issues. So yes, it is going to yell at you that you're exceeding the recommended level, right? So the recommended is 50, but you actually have 10% on both of the pumps. So Mark 1 will actually give you up to 22, and Mark 2 will actually give you up to 55. Now, I try not to use that extra 10%, because pipes are pipes and it feels like you're just asking for trouble. However, this has been running for a while and it has just stayed right at 53.3, and I'm getting 300 flow rate the entire time. The machines are staying on. So at least in this one specific scenario, it's working out for me. That is 1 factory down, 2 to go. Next up is the Quartz Factory. Now that I finally put together a really simple setup, it's time to delete it. If we take a look at the spreadsheet, I'm going to take 300 raw quartz, and I can do this because each of these are impure, so I'll get 150 out of each one. 225 will be used in the pure quartz crystal recipe, and 75 will be used with the cheap silica recipe. These are fantastic alternate recipes that let me get more quartz crystal and silica out of the same amount of raw quartz compared to just the default recipes. And all it's going to take is a little bit of water, which is almost unlimited, and limestone, which is almost unlimited. Or at least that's sure how it feels. I don't think I've come anywhere close to using all the limestone before. By splitting it 225 and 75, which is 3/4 and 1/4, I'll get 175 of each for final products. And with power shards, I only need 2 machines for each of these recipes. So I definitely don't need a lot of space. 2 refineries, 2 assemblers. The factory floor itself can be pretty small. I need to build an electronics factory soon, so this should be enough for my dimensional depots and that. So I'll also need a train station. The 2 quartz nodes are right here, and then right down here, I've got a normal limestone node. This water unfortunately isn't deep enough until you get to right about here. And so somewhere in here, I'm going to add my water extractor, and I can do this with just 1 pipe. I did think about using a packager, but then I need a belt there and a belt going back, or I could just use 1 pipe. So I'm just going to do the pipe. If my main train line is going to run down this canyon here, probably through the middle because that would make the most sense, I could have it go straight through the factory, but I designed my train lines to be stackable. So I don't think running it straight through the factory is the best idea. I want to see if I can cram this factory and train station into this little corner by the waterfall. And that way my main train line can run down this way, and then I can have another line branch off over here, come to this factory, and then the outgoing line can come through this way and then reconnect with the main line. That's the idea. And since this train line is mainly for me, I'll figure out how to get that spiral down to the canyon floor after all of this is in place. Step 1, foundations. I needed to raise it up quite a bit, unfortunately. The train is going to have to come through here, and I think I may even be able to blow this up, but I also think it looks cool, so I kind of want to just leave it in place. and because it slopes in to give this enough space, because really the train station is what's going to take up the most space of this factory. And that's the height I ended up with. One thing I'm not crazy about is the water just running through my foundations. But this is the fun stuff to work around. Now I can add those curved parts and make it look all fancy. Or at least attempt to. That's enough to give me a start. So now we need to figure out kind of where everything else is going to go. If my train station is going to work like this, where it's going to pull in this way and then it's going to come out going that way, I need to make sure that I have enough space to turn out of here. So I know I need at least 2 foundations. So 1, 2. Okay, that would work. So if we lay it right there, see how many freight platforms we can fit in here. I guess for now we'll just put them on this side. I would like to have 4 because that means I could send basically the quartz to 2 places and the silica to 2 different places. I should be able to make a right turn out of here. But I think we'll have it go out this way. And let's see, where would this be? Well, it's a little bit of a lopsided curve, but it could look worse. And then this will go out somewhere. But I'm going to build the factory first, and then I'll do the main track, and then I can figure out where it connects. So let's keep working on this stuff. See, doesn't it look better with the curved parts around it? It does make me wish that I could curve the railing around it though. Maybe one day we'll get curved railing. That would be cool. And thankfully there's just enough space to make a nice 90-degree turn into here. And then I'll have to figure out that part later. But for now, let's build some more factory. With this, we'll do the same height. Go up 7. So that gives me the gap of 6 foundations is just enough. This level, I'm going to use the coated concrete. So I'm going to go ahead and paint it ahead of time. This is the quartz floor. So let's make everything purple. And I could make a blueprint out of the foundations, but I don't know how often I'm going to use purple coated concrete. So I think I'll just freehand this one. And I'll work with the same thing up here. So get rid of those. Falls on a slightly different spot on the foundations, but it kind of gives me something to work around. So I can put the refineries on one side of this thing, and then I'll put the assemblers on the other side. And it'll just keep the water pipe a little bit shorter. Since I only need 2 refineries, I can space these out pretty far apart. Now it's time for the MAM. So let's go ahead and grab our cheap silica and our pure quartz crystal. Since I picked 2 recipes, that means that there's 2 more back in the pool, so I might as well scan another one of my hard drives. And now we can set the recipe. So we got our pure quartz crystal, loaded up with some power shards, and I need 175 across 2 machines, 87.5 each. And now I can do the assemblers. These ones get our cheap silica. And it'll be the same 87.5 for both of them. Like I said, the factory part, really easy. The last major steps would be power for the machines, and then getting the resources over here. And I kind of go back and forth depending on the factory. Sometimes I build the bus first, and then do the decorating kind of around it to incorporate it. And then other times I'd rather do the decorating and then kind of figure out where exactly is convenient to throw that bus in. And since I'm not exactly sure how I want to decorate this, it's in such a weird spot with such limited space, I'm going to work on a bunch of the decorating. Since these 2 nodes are so close, that part's going to be really easy. Same with this node, it'll just go probably straight in underneath and then I'll just run it up somewhere. Running the water is going to be the only part that's a little bit longer, but still, it's not really going to be that long. I'll just run it along the creek and then it can just go straight up the side of the building. So I'm going to start doing some decorating so I can get the bus work done. But there are a couple more things I need to work on before I can get this going. I kind of always knew that this thing was going to end up being in the way. And that's okay. Just gives me another reason to delete it. So time to just mass delete this whole section right here. Doesn't it look so much cleaner and better? Let's fill it up with some train tracks. On some level, it probably would have made more sense to figure out my spiral over by the Quartz Factory, bring that to the canyon floor, and then I could just branch off in either direction from there. But as you can tell, that's not what I'm doing. I need to get the whole thing connected eventually anyways, so my thinking is that if I go from this end all the way through the canyon, it would be easier and more consistent. Although joining up two sides is really pretty easy, I still just thought that this would be a better way to go about it. And so I extended this, and then once I got to this point, I thought, well, I should probably add an intersection. It took a little playing around with, and that's mainly because these sides aren't even. But I realized these blueprints are really great for just making intersections. I can basically just place them where I want the tracks to end up going, and then as long as they're close to each other and the angles aren't too bad, I can just make the intersection just take up that whole space in between them. And sure, you could make it slightly more compact if you wanted to, but we're only talking about 1 or 2 foundations here and there. And so this is really great because I can actually just delete all of these and just redo the whole thing. Once the blueprints are there, it's super easy. You just connect all the different tracks basically. And then just don't plug up the wrong one going in the wrong direction, and you're good to go. I do seem to still have to delete tracks and replace them pretty often for all of the signals, mainly just of an intersection to work. I've been placing a block signal on, well, basically each one of these. There may be a lot of blocks, but they all should be roughly the same size, and so my hope is that everything will run pretty smoothly this way. And the only reason is if I took out like 2 of these and then I just had one really long block section, if 2 trains came and they were fairly close together, once one train got into this block, you would have to wait and wait and wait until it finally cleared the next signal that's on the track, and then the next one could come. Whereas if I have a whole bunch of blocks, as soon as it crosses the next block, this one turns green, and it won't have to slow down or stop when one runs into a much longer block than the other ones. That's my thinking. We'll see how it works out. But I want to show you all a couple things I've learned with the blueprints and the auto connect and all this fun stuff. So I've done this a couple different ways, and an easy way is you put it in the blueprint auto connect. You obviously need to click it once so it connects, and then you can just nudge it straight. And it's nice and easy, but you're going to click it like 100 times to finally get it out to its max distance. Another really easy way is you can just zoom out 10, and then if you add on 2 more, that is basically the max distance of the train tracks. And so now I can copy the blueprint, click it once. Now when I bring it over to here, I'll lock it in place, and then I'm gonna nudge this one over so that it's nice and lined up and we can float up and make sure. Yep, nice and straight. And so I can nudge this, I believe, 1, 2, 3 meters farther, and that's it. So I usually just stick to the full 12 foundations, just because if I need to add any intersections or anything, it's just easy to work with just really even numbers like this. And then you can place it and then go back and just delete these tracks. Or foundations. Try not to delete the tracks. But maybe I don't want to go straight right here. Maybe I wanted this part to turn. Let me show you how I do that. So for this example, I would probably go out probably close to the 10 actually. Maybe we'll bring it back 1 or 2. Let's go back 2. Now I'm going to take this foundation, I'm going to lock it in place, and I'm going to nudge it down. I'm going to go ahead and place that one, and now I'm going to switch it to a 1 meter foundation. And now when I hold control, I have much more control over where I place this foundation. And, still holding control, if I scroll the mouse wheel, I can change this in 5-degree increments for every click. So right now I'm not worried about the actual amount of degrees, I just want this to be facing in the direction I want my train to go. Let's go, yeah, probably more in this direction. So it's not a big turn, just a slight one. And then I'm just going to zoom this out just a couple. Doesn't matter too much because I'm just going to grab this blueprint in the blueprint auto connect, click it once, and then I'm going to come to the end of this foundation, hit H to lock it in place, nudge it down. So now I'm at the right height. And now when I jetpack up, I can kind of play around with the nudging. And at least I know that my angle is right. And I can zoom this out even farther. Okay, so that's about as far. And since we're doing a curve, really you can do it to the full distance if you want, since it's not going to be quite the same as when you're doing a straight section. And I can double check, and yeah, that more or less looks good. Now we can use the camera mode to get an even better vantage and take a look. And if you want to just make minor adjustments, I would just kind of like bookmark where you were. So just grab another foundation, preferably a different size so it's easy to delete. Place this here, and now I could delete this, snap it to this one on the next time, and then make any of those small adjustments from there. I'm going to build this out just a little bit farther, and then I'm going to show you the next trick that I've learned. The train tracks have been extended a little bit farther, and now I'm right back to where the coal plant was. This right here looks like a perfect spot to put a three-way intersection, because shooting through that gap is a nice easy way to get out to the Spire Coast. And that's our entrance to the canyon. With these blueprints, making a three-way intersection is so easy. I'm going to lock a foundation, I'm going to nudge it to the center, and now I am going to zoom it out 5 foundations. The 6th one I'm going to lock in place, and I'm going to do that same thing I did before, and I'm going to nudge it down 1. And now I'm going to switch to the 1 meter foundation. And so here, we're going to do some really basic math. In a circle, we've got 360 degrees. So if I want to do a three-way intersection, that means they are going to be 120 degrees apart. I already know that going from here to here would be 90 degrees. I just need to rotate this another 30 degrees. So if I hold control and I rotate, there's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Click it once. And now I'm going to zoom out 6 because it's the center one plus 5, just like this first one was. I'm going to go ahead and place that, and then I'm delete this one. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but we're going to go the opposite direction. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And then out 6. And now I'm going to go ahead and grab my blueprint, lock it in place, nudge it down, and then do the same thing over here. Should have killed them before I placed that, but now we'll just crouch jump over here. And that's the hard part, because now all I need to do is just make all the connections again. And it's that easy. I just need my path signals in and my block signals going out. And now with my newfound tricks, I am going to run it through the canyon. So I have been really liking it, doing it this way, because it's really easy to make sure that I keep it the same height. Unless I want to change the height, I'd rather keep it so everything is exactly straight. For this next one or two, it's going to go straight. But then when I get to that part, I'm going to do the trick where I need to turn it. And I'll just do the same thing, and you just kind of angle it in just the right direction, and then just kind of build from there. And it should be pretty easy to weave my way through that canyon. I've placed a lot of new train tracks today, so let's just take a quick tour, and then I'll show you the new Quartz Factory. And here we are. And just to show you, to get out of here, it's just going to follow through. And then make a crazy right turn drop. And here we go. Goes right or left. So it'll just be another short little intersection. Here's my new Quartz Factory. Like usual, let's start at the far point and work our way back in. I didn't do a whole lot of decorating. I'm not sure if I'm going to need any more water extractors in this area. There's quite a bit of space right behind this first one, but I didn't want to necessarily enclose the whole thing in case I end up putting any more out here for some reason. So this one's very bare bones and basic, so that's kind of why I tucked it just a little off to the side. I've got one pump there, and then if we follow the pipe all the way through, I just have my second pump here. And that's how I'm getting the 175 water up to the top. Top floor got a little bit more love and added some lights. The assemblers are so much shorter than the refineries. I didn't really want to put a roof on this thing, so I went with more open air design. Because it's so me to make a quartz factory and then just use 0 windows in like the entire thing. Yep, sounds like me. So we've got the basic load balancing. Since it's just 2 machines, it's all really easy. I did the same thing up here with the curved foundations and then some more railings, and then just kind of worked around it. I've got the sink up here. Thankfully with no roof, I've got plenty of space. But the main products are going to head on down to the very bottom floor, and then they're going to go around the elevator, head back up into the storage. But the reason I'm doing it this way is bringing them down here gives me a chance to do any load balancing in the future, and then send them off onto a train, because those plug straight into the freight platforms. So I've got one just short elevator to be able to bring me up and down just this section right here. And then on the other side, I've got another elevator. I realized that there was actually no single foundation space in this factory that would let me go all 3 different floors. It's not super compact, but the way I laid things out just wasn't going to be convenient, and I wasn't about to just start moving around machines just to squeeze in the elevator. It was easy enough to throw it on the outside, and since this is kind of this open air design where I'm using pillars and all that sort of stuff, I didn't think it looked that out of place either. So the very bottom one takes you into the logistics floor. The next stop for the elevator would be the train stations, and then the top floor. I do like using the big frame pillars for buses like this. Just frame the belt, got it over here. The breakdown is 1/4 going to silica, 3/4 going to quartz, so just split the first one in half, and there's my super easy load balancing done. Don't even need a diagram for this one. I decided to go with the small storage and dimensional depot setup as opposed to my bigger ones with the 3 industrial, or even just do 1 or 2. Using quartz and silica with the build gun is mainly the windows and then the signs and the billboards and that sort of a thing. So I'm hoping this will be enough for these. But I am going to want to get a couple more of those upgrades for the dimensional depots pretty soon, I think. And now I get to see the hard work pay off. So I'm going to connect these 2, and that's going to get the limestone turned on. And then I'm going to take my elevator upstairs and I'll get the quartz turned on. Let's go ahead and start that stopwatch. Well, I think 175 might be one of those numbers that is just a little bit hard for this one to pinpoint, but I'm not too sure. Let's see what about this side. Kind of looks like the same thing. I accidentally set my smart splitters the wrong way, and I'm not sending them to storage first, but for this it actually works out because I'm hoping that both of the lines connected will give me a better reading. Well, it's a little disappointing, fluctuating a little bit more than I would prefer. So let's just check the machines. 100%, 100%. Alright, well that one took a few minutes, but hey, we're up to 100%. And at the same time, this one's at 100%. So these are still giving me numbers all over the place. So yeah, unfortunately, I mean, you can definitely see there's a pattern. And as we can see down here at the bottom, it's going from 90 to 240. And so since these machines put it out in such large batches, I think that's basically what we're dealing with. But it's a little unfortunate that it can't still kind of even it out to just the right number. I'm sure this one says the same thing. Yep, same. Still fluctuating. And then even this one, I was hoping with both of them combined it would give me a better, more accurate number, but this one's still fluctuating too. But if all the machines were at 100%, then I'm going to switch this back over. So I set this up wrong to begin with, but it was actually nice to work it out and make sure that I had everything the right way. And now they're both being sent to the storage and dimensional depots. Once they fill up, then they'll go back to being sent to the sink. And that really won't take very long. But now I've also got the train ready, so I can do my load balancing, put stuff on there, and send it off to a new factory. So there's 2 factories down, 1 to go. And for the final factory, I'm back out here right on the edge of the rocky desert. And this is how far the train line goes into the rocky desert. To figure out where exactly I want to place this copper sheets factory, let's take a look at the plan. I'm going to completely overclock an impure copper node and get 150 copper ore out of it. Using the pure copper ingot recipe, I can turn that into 375 ingots. And then I can use the steam copper sheet alternate recipe to turn all of the ingots into copper sheets. So again, the plan is for this to supply my dimensional depot and some future factories, like the upcoming one to make all my electronics. So this definitely needs a train station. And because in that northwest corner, 2 of those factories are producing space elevator parts, I've been wanting to put a train station out there. And it just so happens there's an impure copper node. So now the question is, how do I want to get out there? Normally the direction I would have it go is split off this way, head over probably pretty close to the coast, or maybe kind of cut through the desert there and then go down the coast. And I've been wanting to change things up and do things a little bit different this playthrough, so I thought instead of that, I would cut down this way. And I'm just going to keep using my new method here, where I just go out, control foundations, and let's see, is this going to cross? Oh, there we go, look at that. I won't even need to change elevation yet. The smarter direction would probably be to cut across that way, but I think heading through that archway sounds like way more fun. This one only needs to be 2. And so I'm going to do the same thing, just put it in Blueprint Auto Connect. Click it once, and then look over here, hit H, nudge it into place, make sure it's straight. Looks good. And there we go. And now that I have explosive rebar, clearing this stuff out is so much easier. Well, I've made a lot of progress, and I'm pretty close. But I've been trying to place the block signals as I go, and that way hopefully I don't miss huge sections, which would create a whole bunch of traffic because then there's just huge blocks in the middle of my system. But unfortunately, the block signals take computers. And I could just throw down a crafting bench and I could make a bunch more. But why do I want to do that when I could just place a train station and a manufacturer, load it up with power shards and summer sloops, deleting some more machines, and then I found one more so that I had all 4. And now I can get twice as many for the same amount of materials. It would help if I actually loaded the machine. And there it goes. Once I extend this just a little bit farther, we'll take a train ride and I'll show you the whole thing. All aboard! Not a bad stop. Didn't even roll. And there's my crazy train tracks. The intersection where we started is right behind there, and then it just goes behind these rocks, and then down here. And they're just so much easier to curve and build with now, it feels like. This really didn't take too long. And then I just built another 3-way intersection there. And then from here, I'm not really sure if I'm going to go wide and go on the outside of these rocks, or if I'm going to try to turn it in and go on the inside. Once I have a plan for either the Spire Coast or getting down into the grassy fields, I'll figure that out. That is a future move problem. Right now, the line comes all the way out to here. I've gotten it close enough to where I think I want to figure out where this train station is going to go. The other ones have had the train station built into the factory, but I want this one to be able to deal with the smart elevator parts. And since there's still so many other resources out here in the desert, I kind of want to leave it expandable just in case. And then I'm going to do a separate factory for the actual copper sheets. And if I zoom in, right there is my copper node. And since I also need water, what I'm going to do is something similar to this one. But I think this one I'm just going to build all the way down on the water. I'll just have a short bust bringing the iron ore from up here down to here. After a little bit of trial and error, me and the bean, I don't know where he's going, I built some train stations. I want to be able to come back here easily, so this first train station isn't going to have any freight platforms, and it's just so I can set this destination. Eventually I could erase the use for these with teleporters, but that is just so far down the line. I don't know where exactly these things are going to go or what's going to get plugged into these. I really haven't been planning things out too far in advance, and so we'll figure it out. But there's still plenty of space going this way. If I need more than 2 freight platforms, there's plenty of space. I could make these next sections quite a bit bigger, and the tracks are so much easier to build and work around. I can just kind of add an oddly shaped part of the building if I need a bigger train for some reason. But the reason these are so short are the space elevator parts are being made in super low quantities. And the copper sheets, honestly, there aren't that many either. My plan is to set aside 25 out of the 375 for my dimensional depot. So that leaves me with 350. And for that, I won't need that many freight platforms. Now I have to figure out how to connect these two. It really wasn't too bad. The first step was to get it up to the right height. And for that, I just zooped out a whole bunch of foundations like this. Until you get to the right spot, basically. And then once I went to the last flat one, so that's where we left off, I just used ramps. I wanted to do it as a gentle slope, and the 1 meter ramp gives me the most flexibility also. So I just started here and then just zooped it all the way up until I got to the same height as those foundations. And then I basically found the middle point, and that's where I put this one, because this one needed to be the actual ramp piece, because I needed them to kind of continue through here, and I didn't want them to get all wavy. The start and end are both the flat pieces, but the very middle section is the ramped one. And now that this one is at the right height, the next one I just needed to angle so that it was back onto the world grid. And then from here, it's basically just a right angle. And then that one, I wanted to go around the trees. And with things like this, I just laid out a whole bunch of foundations to place the track. And then afterwards, I would get this into the right spot. And then I would just nudge it down and then over and right into the right spot. So the track has at least some support going from there all the way over to here. There's some, but there's not a ton of space down here because I'm working on the slope. I think it'll actually be easier if I do the logistics floor above the train station for this one. And so what I'm thinking is I'll do my normal roof where I have a 6 meter gap, just plenty of space for the train stations. And then up here, I don't need a ton of space, but I definitely want at least enough space to be able to fit the industrial storage container so that I can make sure that I have enough for the big buffer. And since this is a logistics floor, it would be fine if I cut into it like this. It really wouldn't bother me. But at the same time, it'd be nice if I just had a little bit more space and there was that clearance. So I think I'll use a 2 meter foundation for this. So that's 4, 8, 10 meters of clearance for my logistics floor. I don't want to do all the decoration work for the train station right now, but I wanted to get some of it out of the way. And so I came up with these, although I'm not crazy about them, so there's a good chance I'm going to change it. And one of the reasons I might not want to use it is each one uses 240 quartz per blueprint. I do have them automated, but unfortunately this is where my alien technology tree is at. And I only have 18, and this next upgrade costs 13, so I have to make a choice. Is it one more stack size, or is it the upload speed? I'm currently at 3 stacks total and 60 per minute. I could bring it up to 4 stacks, or 120 per minute. I'm going to go with speed, but let me know if you would have picked differently. Well, that'll certainly help. Back to work. I really just wasn't crazy about the way it was looking. I'm sure I'll be able to edit that and fit it into a different factory. Not a whole lot of decorations, and clearly things aren't even colored the right color, so there's quite a bit left to do. I just wanted to figure out this part and kind of mentally map out where it's going to expand if I ever need to, and I don't think it should be too bad. I can just add more track here, and if it has to be a longer train, then I think there's still going to be plenty of room for this to kind of branch out and then still be able to feed in and then exit the same direction. Bean, where are you going? And then I've got my logistics floor up top, and the 10-meter gap should give me plenty of space. I think I've played with trains enough for right now. Let's get back to building a factory. I don't want to show it off every time, but I figure every once in a while I can show it off. So this is how I place my miners. I place 2 foundations, and that way I can get it on the world grid height. So I hold control when I place these foundations. And I want it to face this way, because we're going to do the factory just right down there. Now I can delete my foundations. There's probably a number of different ways you could do this and a number of different items this will work with. I just use the painted beam because I know how it works. So I'm going to hold control and it'll let me snap it to the actual miner. And then scrolling my mouse wheel, I want it to be aligned in this direction. I'm going to click it once and then I'm going to drag it out this way. I'm going to grab my 4-meter foundation and I'm going to snap it right to the end of the painted beam. Once it's there, I'm going to lock it in place with H. Hit page down twice. As far as the height goes, it's on the world grid. And now it's center aligned with the miner. And the spot that I'm looking for is just 1 meter past, just because that's how my blueprints work out. And now you can zoop in either, well, it'll only let me zoop in one direction, so I just zoop it this way. I zoop it out 4, delete the first 3 and the painted beam. I grab my miner foundations pattern blueprint, hit H to lock it in place, and then page down to nudge it to the right height. And then I can place it. And now I can delete this foundation. And now my miner is perfectly surrounded by this fun pattern. Better color it copper. And now if I select the same blueprint again, I can hold down E for the radial menu, and I can bring up all my different miners. These are all the exact same blueprint, just different colors. So we're going to go with copper, put it into blueprint mode, lock it in place, and then it's just 2 meters off. And that's how I can get these centered just perfectly on the miner. But of course the tricky part is now it is not quite on the world grid. Thankfully the height is right, so I don't have to worry about that part. But if I hold control over here, so if I get it the right height, we'll see it is just slightly off. So even with a half nudge, it's still not quite lined up. There's a couple different ways you can go about it. For this specific one, what I'm probably going to end up doing is just using some half foundations because I only need 1 belt. And I'm just going to create a bus because that's kind of the theme of what I've done with the other factories around here. I'll have it come out here and then I'll drop it down to this floor using a lift, just like I did over here. And then I'll just run this along the ground and then I'll be able to merge it in with the factory over here. And because I won't be running the foundations directly into it, it'll give me some wiggle room. And that'll be one of the last things I put in, but I'll show that off at the end. Another really good way to deal with this is, say I have these on the world grid, and I want this belt to go this way instead. If I need to make a 90-degree angle, and I'm not going to do a bus like this where it's actual solid foundations, going from off the world grid onto the world grid is really easy now. If I wanted to go this way, now I can just place a conveyor pole, or I can grab one of my blueprints that have everything included in here, and I can just place it down here. I nudge it down and just place it straight through there. And then when you delete it, it's already at just the right height. And now I can take the belt, and instead of in default mode, if I put it in straight mode, it'll just make that nice right angle. And now you've brought it onto the world grid, and now you can run it how you normally do. I've got some foundations placed. So there is a rock just like right there. And I pretty much needed to bring the foundations up this high just to get around it. But it'll actually work out pretty well because with refineries, this is about where I like to put my walkways to go around them all. Let's place some machines. So this is all refineries. Even though the ore is going to drop down probably right around here, and it would probably make sense to just build the factory going out that way. I want things to go this way. I think the flow of everything will just make a little bit more sense. I'll have my storage up here and the sink, and then I can just run a belt from here up to the train station. And I think it'll just be easier having everything go this direction. So these right here will be the ones making the copper sheets. I don't really need a lot of space, but I'm gonna go ahead and nudge these back so they're lined up on this foundation. I need 375 across 8 machines, so 46.875. And we'll color these copper, because of course we're going to. And then for these, I need 8. I guess I didn't make this big enough. Alright, there we go. And it ends right at the edge of the foundation. Perfect. These require the bulk of the water, and I could fit the entire factory on one Mark II pipe, but I'd rather keep the two separate. Now thankfully I'm building basically at water level, and that's the amount of head lift all the machines have without any pumps. And the reason I bring that up is because I would much rather lift these pipes up, and that's still way under the 10 meters. And the reason I want to lift these pipes up, it's because these ones making the copper ingots, I'd really like to be able to just feed the belts into here. And I mean, I could have done this to get up and over the pipes, but that seems kind of clunky. And feeding the liquids from above works pretty well. So unfortunately, this is not quite in the right spot. These, I can get it right on the half foundation, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's in the right spot. Now that I know where the pipes are going to be, I can place my splitter. Oh, we can just let these take up a little bit more space. So we'll go here, and then each one of these need 46.875, so that's only a Mark I belt. And now we can place our last row of refineries. So these ones will line up right with these splitters. Instead of doing the steam copper sheet, these ones are going to be doing the pure copper ingot. And if I completely overclock them, I only need 4. And that pairs up really nicely with the 8 I have making the copper sheets. Another pretty easy factory to set up. Now for the water extractors, I am just going to place them right out here. And the thing I love about this game is there's just so many ways to do simple stuff like this. So I'm going to show you something that I completely understand if you do not like. But as the saying goes, fake it till you make it. So I'm going to place 2 walls right here and delete the foundation. I'm sure some of you know where this is headed. I think this pipe goes, let's see, where does it go? Yep, we're right in the middle of the foundation. So if I grab my wall hole, I'm going to place one here and then one there. I'm going to grab my pipe, connect it on this side, and now I can just delete the wall. And now I can replace the foundation. I've been totally okay with doing this with pipes for a long time because, well, in real life you can just bury pipes in concrete. We do it all the time. But the more I've thought about it is we've got the floor holes and those can go straight down through the foundations. So I really don't see why we can't go horizontally through foundations. And that's my twisted logic with these ones and the wall holes and doing the same thing. So I didn't talk about it, but over at the Quartz, I did the same thing using the wall hole trick with the conveyors to get it through a half foundation. And because these are black on the inside, it works really well. It would have been much more difficult to pull off when we only had the conveyor walls. But now that we have the wall holes, I still don't like it because I know that there are parts moving straight through a foundation. And there is a part of me that does bother. But the more I thought about it, the easier it was to convince myself that these can go vertically. I don't see why I can't just fake it to make it and have the wall holes go horizontally through a foundation. The water extractors are in place, so the next step is figuring out where all these final products are going to go. And for this, I'm just going to slap down a whole line of mergers. I pretty much have to group them all up together because I think they're putting out kind of a random number. It's something and an 1/8. And this last one, I'm going to go ahead and turn facing this way. 46.875. Easiest thing is just to group them all up together. But at least these can all be Mark 1. And once I bring them up to here, I need to do a little bit of load balancing. So I'm going to start with a splitter and make sure it's lined up with that one. Yep, that looks lined up. So now they're 4 meters apart, and so this should connect really easily. Just like that. I want 25 out of the 375 I'm making. 375 divided by 25 is 15, so I need 1/15. Well, that's not too hard to make. So I can just place a splitter here. 75 divided by 3 is 125. So these all need to be Mark 3. So there is 250. Now with this 125, I just need to do a 5-way split, and I'll have my 25. So we just need a merger, and then a splitter, and then another splitter. 125 into here. This will end up being, I think, 150. And so out of here is 75, and I could plug that straight into there, but I'm going to need one more merger, so let's go ahead and just place it here. So that is 75 into there, and here's 75. I need to use all 3 of these. One of them goes back to the merger to complete the 5-way loop. One of them goes into here. So there's 75 and 25. Here's 100. Adding that to the 250. Here is my 350. And here is my 25. Now we're at the point. You know the drill. I just need to run the belt from the miner down here, do my decorations, and get it connected to power. So give me a second, and then we'll take a tour. Let's go ahead and start it off right here at the miner. I added another power tower and just sandwiched it in between the other two, because one was already running over to my concrete factory. And then I just added another one onto the side of here, although I do think I want to dress that up a little bit more, because I kind of forgot about it. And so here's the bus. I wanted to keep the theme more or less the same as the rest of the area around here. So the belt just runs down here, and this is all basically still off-grid because of the miner. And then once you get to here, you just drop straight down. Thankfully it lined up and I could place a belt, and I think it's pretty much perfectly straight. And then here I was able to basically just kind of bridge the gap between the world grid and the off-world grid. The distance wasn't quite even, and so these clipped together a little bit. But other than that, things lined up really nicely. And that's how the copper ore is getting into the factory. Here we have the roof of the factory. I decided to add a whole bunch of the fans. So they've got some decent chonk to them, but they snap directly in the middle, right? So when you place it up here, let me delete one of these so that we can drop down real quick. So if this is a 1 meter roof and you place it right there, it sticks through just a tiny bit. And so you have a fan on this side, but the difference is the fan is basically just like clipping through the foundation, because you can still see the foundation through it, and it looks way better on this side. So basically these are just one stacked right on top of the other, just on either side of the foundation, so that it didn't look super weird. And I tried doing it where you nudge it like a half a meter down, but then you end up being able to see the foundation, I think, on both sides. So that wasn't really ideal. And just to create a fun, different pattern, I just used the down corner ramps and just faced them all into each other like that. And if you use the chrome on the Fixit, everything's super sparkly. I've got a very glittery roof now. I was just trying to play around with some different styles, so I alternated going with the full foundation of concrete and then a half foundation of the Fixit so that I could paint it that chrome and make it really glittery. And then just top the roof with some ramps and inverted ramps. And then just turned one of them into a walkway. And so you come up here and you've got lots of glass foundations. Here's the sink. So as of right now, let's go into camera mode. I've got the counter here. And the way this is set up is the 350 line is going to go straight into the sink for now. We've got the load balancing, and then the 25 is going to come over here. We've got another counter. And then I've got 2 smart splitters. And the only reason I needed 2 is because I only wanted to put 1 dimensional depot on here. Eventually both of them will have one. But I want this first container to be prioritized, and then the overflow to fill up the second one. And then once both of those are full, And then I want the second overflow to kick in, and then it's going to go to the merger, join up with the 350, and head on into the sink. On the other side of this wall is just rock, and so I thought making it all windows would be really boring. And so it's all flat on the outside, because with these ones what I did is just made them half foundations so that it all looks uniform on the outside, but on the inside here it gives me some depth. And then I just used one large billboard, and that takes up the same space as 4 foundations. And if you're curious about this, I just picked kind of a random blue color. I picked the one with writing, and then I just deleted all the writing. And then you go to background, select icon, and then you need to go to backgrounds. And then the majority of these, I believe, are moving. So I think like this one is stationary, just fix it. And like these ones are just a gradient, so these ones don't move, but things like the checkered and the diagonal lines, if you select, they'll just kind of slowly move across. So I just went with the rectangles. And I think it spices up the wall pretty well. I used to be really picky with clipping, and clearly as I've played more, I've become more and more accepting of it. Obviously, there's still lines I draw. But this one, I was surprised, actually looked pretty good to me. So I just clipped a whole bunch of the walkways basically through 2 of the industrial storage containers. So they get plugged in down below, but they clip in really nicely right here where it doesn't look super weird to me. They really just look like the normal standard smaller containers, to be honest. And so this really doesn't bother me. I actually kind of like it. Let's head on up back to the miner and get this party started. One last thing to do. Start the stopwatch. So looking like 350 might be one of those numbers that the throughput monitor just has a really hard time with. Let's check on our 25. Now that's what I like to see. Just nice and steady. Thank you, load balancing. Well, if this is going to continue to fluctuate just right above and below 350, I think the best thing to do would be to let this run for a little bit. There's only 12 refineries here, so I could easily come back and just check them all to make sure that they're all at 100%. Seems like a good time to do a little bit more work on the train station. And here's the new train station. Again, I went with the more open air design and didn't put a ton of windows in here. I thought that this would be a much easier way to just delete this whole section and expand it this way if I needed to. It's a really easy pattern to replicate, so I shouldn't have any problems doing it again in the future. What I did was found the very center point and placed 2 of the large concrete pillars. And then to give them this diagonal, I went with the good old painted beam. So to make this, let me just clear this one out and I'll do it again. So with nothing there, I'm going to grab my painted beam. And with these, I went 2 meters in, so they're at like the 1/4 of a foundation mark. You click it once, and now I need to hit R twice to get it into free form. And this would be straight down, and you can tell because it's exactly 24 meters. I just brought it to the next foundation over in the exact same spot, so it's going to be in a straight line. And now it's 25.298, and it'll be this exact length for every single one of them. And then I just placed the beam right there. And then I grab my small concrete pillar. And then either you could have this very first one clip down to here, or if you lock it in place and you nudge it up, it'll nudge along the beam. And so now I can make it so it doesn't bury itself so far into there. And now I can just zoop it up. Now if you want to save yourself the extra objects, what you can do is just place it most of the way, delete the painted beam, and then finish placing it. Or else there will just be a beam hidden in between your pillars. And I was lazy, so there is a painted beam under pretty much all of these. to give the logistics floor a little bit of depth, and I figured nothing was going to happen in that very first foundation because that's right above where all of these pillars are. So nothing's going to be plugging into this section unless it's plugging in from like out here somewhere. And what I'll probably do is place a bunch of lights up here just so it pops out a little bit more. Right now it's a little bit dark. The creek runs right through the factory, and I didn't want to just have foundations going straight through it, so I'm sure you've seen plenty of people do this before. I made it into a blueprint, but all you need to do is just lock a wall in place and then just nudge them. So I basically just have them all 1 meter apart. So from here, and then nudge it. That was 3, there's 2, there's 1, and there's right on the foundation. And then you'll get that same spacing. I just made each section its own blueprint, and then I included the beam on top of it so that it kind of frames the whole thing. And then all I need to do is add the connector and then the side piece. So we have one where the creek enters, and then I just have a bigger one where the creek exits. It's not completely finished. There's a couple more things I want to do to this train station. Eventually I want to add a hypertube network in the area so that I could easily get in between all of these different factories if I needed to. But I'm not sure how I want to lay that out. But now that they've given us the branches and the splitters and all those cool things, I really want to make it work. But maybe I'll revisit that one in the next video. Because that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. I almost forgot. Let's check our refineries real quick. So unfortunately, it looks like 350 is one of those numbers that the throughput monitor has a hard time nailing down exactly. It's close, but I have a feeling all of these are going to read 100. Yep, if all 8 of the first ones are at 100%, that kind of has to mean that all of those are at 100%. But at least 25 is rock steady. I was able to accomplish quite a bit today. I expanded my train network about a quarter of the map, and I automated Quickwire, copper sheets, quartz, and silica, and those are ready for one of the next factories. Unfortunately, it's not quite the next factory, as much as I would love to, because I really need to automate those computers and some of the other electronics that every once in a while I'm still having to manually feed some machines. I've already planned out my electronics factory, and the one thing I'm missing is a reliable source of rubber. That is what I'll be tackling in the next video. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be expanding my train line out to the Spire Coast or down over to the West Coast to make this. But I've got a good plan to turn a little bit of crude oil into a whole bunch of both rubber and plastic. And I think that will finally replace all of my temporary factories. Until I get to the next phase and have to build another one. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.